Yo ho ho, it's time to go back to the dungeon far below. Players arrive in time to die, and I love to watch them cry. Grab some dice, oh, grab some fun. Yeah, it's time for, you know it's time for those crazy teachers in the dungeon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Teachers in the Dungeon. I'm Tom Gross with Dan Ream.
Hello.
And we are the Teachers in the Dungeon. Sitting in, I'm never sure whether this is the tower or just in addition to the dungeon where we record.
I think we need to call it the tower since
It is the North Tower because the other location is the South Dungeon because I never record from a tower in my location, in my keep. So yes, good. Glad you are all joining us. If it's your first time, thanks a lot for giving us a try. And if you have been listening for a while, thank you so much for coming back and joining us.
Yes.
Don't forget that you can follow us on social media. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then if you would like to comment a little deeper, give us some ideas for shows, give us some topics you want us to discuss, or just share stories of your own, send us an email at teachersinthedungeon@gmail.com. So tonight's topic of discussion, this is going to be we started this series a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
In January, Behind the Screen.
Yes.
And so Dan, you came up with this topic. I sense because you had a campaign or campaign session go sort of this way. So I'll let you introduce the topic.
So I've seen some memes out there too about this. And so the topic for today's discussion is how do you cope when you feel like a session has failed?
Okay.
We've all been there. You get done, everybody leaves, and you're left kind of thinking, oh, that sucked.
Yep.
That just did not go the way I expected.
What are you talking about? I've never had that kind of feeling before. Okay. My nose just grew 2 feet. So yeah, absolutely. We all, that's one of the fears I think that people have when being prospected or proposing, or they're just thinking about being a dungeon master.
Yeah.
It's what if it stinks? What if the players don't want to come back or something like that?
If the game is running as it's supposed to, even the best planned person is going to have to wing it every session at one point or another.
Yes.
And that can be pretty intimidating, pretty scary, particularly when you feel like, oh, that didn't go the way I wanted it to.
Right. Yeah, there takes a little bit of improv that goes into it. And not to, I've never felt like you have to be a pro at it. You just have to be willing to accept that. Because I am not as indicated many times on this show, I'm not very good at improv. I like to work with the script and kind of have, not necessarily a linear, but I like to know the paths. I like to know the roads that it can go. But as we all know, and like you said, it's sort of the running joke in Dungeons & Dragons. You can plan for A, B, C, and D, but the players are going to take Z or X or M, or, they're going to take 1,000 different directions than what you thought.
Yeah.
So I'll let you get started.
Sure. So I kind of thought of the best way to deal with this. I guess like I said, cope, but cope kind of has a negative connotation now. So process maybe is a better way.
Okay,
How do you process your feelings when you feel like it failed? I think that the thing that I wrote down is that dealing with your feelings requires understanding them first. So I think the first thing I have to do is sort out, why I'm feeling down, I'm feeling disappointed, but why is that? And there's a few different reasons for it. It could be, is there boredom involved? Are you disappointed? And where is the source of that? Is it something that you felt you failed at? Were you frustrated with maybe players not taking something seriously when you wanted them to? There's lots of different sources for those unhappy feelings when you're done with a session.
Sure.
And I think it's important to figure out why that is.
I don't know that I've ever really thought of it that way, but I do like that mindset that you can't really be too hard on yourself until you know what it is that you're being hard on yourself for. And I would bet most of the times it's not as bad as you think, because it's kind of like when you do know, like when you're an actor and you know what your lines are, you know what was supposed to happen on stage, and something goes wrong. How would the audience know?
Right. Right.
You know, how do your players know that you didn't do this or you forgot to do this? I mean, sometimes it's pretty glaring. As in, and I'll give an example of a time when I really felt like it went south. And I don't know that you guys necessarily sensed it until after the fact. And that was when you guys defeated that dragon.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, I was happy that you guys were happy about it. You know, there was loot, there was all that kind of thing, which is good. But I was like, man, something didn't go right there, that I let a common spell impact the dragon so much, and I really thought it was more my planning as far as like what the dragon would do, but really it was more in my planning that I didn't understand what the dragon could do.
Right.
And so that fits kind of along with what you're saying, is that I was misguided as to why I thought things didn't go well. And I don't know that you guys really felt that anything went wrong, other than maybe, boy, that was a lot easier than we expected it to be.
Oh, I didn't think it was easy. It was exciting. But that kind of goes into my very next bullet point, is before you decide a session was a failure, you do need to check with the players.
Yes.
9 times out of 10, they will have had a good time, I think. And that's kind of my example. I just ran a session with you guys a few days ago, and I don't think you'll mind if I say this, but we've got a decidedly OP cleric
We
in the
do.
group that has built it out, beautifully, but can administer huge amounts of hit point healing
Yes.
repeatedly. And I thought, what can I do to make it a little more challenging? And I thought, well, this is something I've never been good at, is putting encounters back to back in a way that forces the party to conserve spell slots and tricks that they can do. And so that's what I devised, is that you are on an open prairie running for your lives from a pack of gnolls. And my thought was the gnolls would be tracking you, and they're just gonna, you know how hyenas do, they'll like rush in and then back and in and back, and basically just wear out their prey before they go after them.
Right.
And that's how I designed it, but that was all we did for the whole session.
I was curious why. So tell me more about why you felt like that didn't go so well.
It felt to me like it was getting to be a slog for you guys. Okay, yet another same group that, same monster that we've faced in the last 3 encounters here in this session. They're back again. They're back again. They're back again. And I really started to doubt the wisdom of doing that. In my mind, it was going to be an exciting chase, and I'm not sure it felt like that. Part of it is you guys I had percentage dice rolls to see if they would attack you on any given day.
Okay.
And the way that I had put the mechanics is each day the chance would rise.
Okay.
And once they hit on you, then it was done. They would keep dogging you. And unfortunately, you guys just rolled really badly. And from the day 1 or day 2, they locked onto you guys.
Yeah.
So it was a shock to me when first of all you texted and said that was really exciting, and part of me was like, well, you got to say that, you got to be, because you know what it's like to be a DM. You're being nice. You're sort of soothing the wound. But then on Monday, then Brian at school came up and said how excited he was, how exciting it was, and I thought, really? Oh, and in that moment, then I thought, okay, maybe it was okay. Maybe I've got no business feeling bad about this.
I have to say, when we walked out of the house, I don't know, Marcus and Paul kind of went ahead and on one side of the street, and Brian and I were on the other. And I looked at Brian and I said, that was a lot of fun. he goes, holy cow, that was challenging and fun. He goes, I did get frustrated, but like the frustration was out of like the excitement of it. So I think we felt what you wanted us to feel, because when you just described that as you wanted it to feel like we were running for our lives, I don't know. It's been a long time since I felt like I've been like my character has been running for his life. And you left us on a cliffhanger, so I'm not sure exactly how that's going to resolve itself, because we definitely do feel that way. I mean, the conversation on a daily basis between Brian and Marcus and I have constantly been, well, what if we do this? And we have a 5-10 minute like parlay of like strategy. And it's like, all right, I got to think about this. And so you really got the juices flowing with that session. And what I thought was cool about it was the fact that we didn't get a break.
Yeah.
So I think on your end, I'm still trying to put myself in your shoes to figure out. But I guess I can. What I'm hearing you say is it just like it was the same. It felt like to you the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
On our end of it was, yeah, it was the same creatures and even kind of the same setup, just a little bit different terrain. But what was different for us is, I don't have those spells anymore.
Oh yeah.
We've already tried this. That didn't work. And so each time as we were navigating like less stuff, trying to save the refugees, we got fewer hit points. It was a different battle every time for us, I think, at least on my side of it was. So no, that was cool. I really appreciated the way you had planned that and put it together. Something I want to mention, and this is where I think for DMs that are out there, if you are in a session where you're you DM some of the time, I DM some of the time, and one of the things that I always appreciate when I finish is you always give me feedback most of the time is that very night. And whether it's like constructive or just praise, I appreciate that because it helps me to do what you just said as far as like how to process.
Yeah.
Is what was the players thinking. So as DMs, I think it's good to try to establish that relationship with at least one player to be like, hey, text me when you get home, or let me know what you thought about tonight. And the quicker they do it, boy, I'm always late. Sometimes it's not immediate, and I'm laying there in bed, the phone in hand. I wonder if Dan's gonna text me and tell me how that went. So that's why I'm always like trying to get back to you. And I don't know, maybe it is always praise, because as a player, I always have fun playing in your game. But even if it's constructive criticism or just like, boy, how'd you put that together, or whatever, I appreciate that discourse afterwards, because it does help me as the DM process, because there are a lot of times, quite frankly, it's probably more than not, where I go home after a session after DMing where I'm like, dang, that just didn't quite pan out the way I'd hoped it would, and so the things like that. So
I think I would agree. I think, but your analogy is true that you as the actor on the stage, the DM, you've got a vision in your head, and if the play doesn't match that,
right,
that feels bad. But the players don't know,
right,
what to the expectation.
Yeah, and that goes into like another processing or coping strategy is it's a mindset shift. Now for me, and you've been playing for a long time now, maybe new DMs don't have this type of shift because of the way Dungeons and Dragons is introduced today, but we grew up where we created the story and the players followed a story that we put together. We created this dungeon. The players are going to go through the dungeon and they're going to find the loot. Whereas today, really the structure of Dungeons and Dragons is it's a shared story.
Yeah.
So if I can switch that mindset to it didn't go the way I wanted, more to our story moved forward.
Yeah.
Whether it was the way I wanted it to or that I thought it would, I guess really doesn't matter.
Well, I think that's one thing watching you that I sort of picked up and want to get better at is the flexibility. I don't think we've gotten to I know we haven't gotten to this story yet in our retelling, but my bard decided that he was going to basically just steal an impounded carriage out from under the nose of the police of Waterdeep. And you let me know later that you did not want that to happen. And if that had been me in your shoes, I think I would have been inflexible and just said, nope, nope, nope. But you went with it, and you forced my character to roll, and it became, to me, I guess I'm aggrandizing myself a little bit, or us, because I felt like there was a point where your police guard and my bard kind of sparring back and forth. Like all the other players were just on the edge of their seat wondering what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Like it was a dramatic performance. And, they kind of were wondering, what's the next cockeyed thing that Dan's going to pull out to try to convince and lie. And
I don't remember. So many times your bard rolls so well in persuasive situations that it's just going to totally change the course of the story. But yes, I do recall that. And you know what? In the long run, that's been kind of a fun thing. Like, I'll never forget when Muckluck decided he's going to push the rats around in that.
yes.
Was that I think that actually that might have been before.
That was an earlier. We have a whole fleet of carriages.
You do. You've got like 3 of them, I think.
And I just honestly, and this is a complete tangent, but as a player, the whole reason I went for that is that the other players were talking about, oh, we need to be cool to get that carriage, steal that carriage. As a person, as an individual, I in real life would never, ever, ever do anything like that.
Oh, right.
I am way too cautious. We don't need that. No, we're fine. We got out alive. That's enough. Let's leave all enough alone. But I thought, no, my bard at that point would not do that. He sees that his friends want that. He's going to try to get it. And it was fun to play a character that I am not.
Yeah. Right.
In that situation.
Yeah, and so, as DM, I didn't want... your roles, like I said, really kind of dictated it, but at the same time, you got to a point of persistence and convincing nature to where I couldn't just let the watch allow it to happen, but you had done everything right. And I was like, you know what? Let's go with it and let that happen. That is a time, I will say that is a time when I'm usually pretty happy about the way things turn out. I rarely go home feeling defeated when you guys are happy about something, because it was kind of a fun moment of Dungeons and Dragons, and it didn't change necessarily the story, but it gave you guys a bit of confidence for sure. And now
becomes part of the lore of the group.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. I don't know that I have. Do you have other items of coping? Because go ahead with that.
Sure. So I think there are some times though when a session does fail, that the players themselves are not entirely entertained by the time it's done. And I had one of those just recently too. My dad's and kids group. I think I was overselling it to myself. I had a plan where the group was the party is trying to work its way through a jungle to find the source of some weird magical mishap that's caused this toxic blue fog to spread through and just mutate and harm people. And they have to cross a dragon's territory. And looking back, maybe I shouldn't have told them that, but the NPC that's helping them knew and said, we got to go fast. And so the whole conceit is this dragon does stop them in human form, and she's a green dragon, so she's really nasty about them there. And looks at them a little bit and then says, well, I'm just going to keep you. You'll be useful slaves to me. And and then what I wanted was there to be enough discussion and maybe even a little bit of a fight, but they would notice about her that she's been affected by that fog. She is ill. Okay. And she would notice that they are not. They met a tribe that was able to give them some medicine to dose them, to protect them. And so once she notices that, then she's like, wait, why are you okay? And so that becomes another level of what do we tell her, what do we not tell her? Because one of the NPCs actually has to make it every day, and they're like, if she finds out, she's just going to kidnap her.
Right.
And then in the end, what I wanted to have, this is railroading now that I think about it, is that I wanted them to get to the point in the discussion with her that she would admit that she knows how to undo this magical catastrophe, but it takes a certain number of spellcasters working together.
Oh, okay.
So she can't do it herself. And so that's why that will be the hook that will allow her to let them leave. And anyway, so I think I just piled too much on top.
Okay.
And they were all scared of her, and so they just wouldn't say anything at all. I'd have her say something, and they'd just stare at each other, and they wouldn't know what to say.
Nobody wants to say the wrong thing.
Yeah, and I finally had to kind of nudge it to the point where I felt like I was just reading them a story,
Oh, okay.
and that felt kind of bad. And so I did ask. That's the dads and kids D&D. So I asked my daughter later, and she noticed. I could tell that she was kind of being polite. I didn't want me to feel bad, but also this is where there are other effects possible. It was a weird time for playing. It was like Sunday morning,
Okay.
and everybody was just sleepy, and that just kind of put them all off their game, and they all just
Yeah.
kind of sat there like bumps.
Okay. They wanted this. Well, I mean, in an instance like that, maybe they wanted the story just to be told
Yes.
to them.
Well-
which is possible. Sometimes that happens.
So I thought, to be brutally honest on myself, I probably could have prepared a little better. I could have had a few more leading questions ready from the dragon.
Okay.
I should have thought more thoroughly about how they would encounter her and those sorts of things. So there were definitely things I could do differently and probably would next time around.
Right. Well, and we know as being teachers, being reflective on your practice, being reflective on your planning and games is also an important coping method of, when things don't go well, because we know from the classroom, not every lesson's going to be a success.
Right.
And so being reflective and being honest with yourself on, like you just said, maybe you felt like maybe you railroaded it a little bit
Yeah.
hard. Although I do think there's a place and time for that, because players are wishy-washy, or they aren't sure exactly what they're supposed to do. And so as the DM, we give them a little nudge.
That's true. As a player, there are times where I do want you. I feel like saying, just tell me what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
What the solution is here. So, so yeah, I could see where that would be the case.
I will say, you talked about, maybe being more prepared and having those leading questions. That is probably the worst I feel as a DM, walking away from a session where, I don't know, and I wish I could blame it on you, the players, saying, well, you took me in a place I just wasn't really expecting. If I'm prepared, we ought to be somewhat close. And when I have to be constantly looking up monster stats,
I had to do that in this, yes.
or looking up rules of things that I was like, why didn't I do that, or
Yes.
why wasn't I ready for that?
Yes.
Like when we were in Saltmarsh, I was like, okay, I need to be ready, because if they go to the ocean or they get on a ship, I better know underwater rules. It's like I studied up on that. You guys never used it, which is fine. I didn't necessarily want you to go that way, but I thought I better be ready just in case.
Yeah.
But man, there are so many times. I feel like I'm a little better about it these days, but there have been some times down in the dungeon here where you guys are doing something. I'm just like, guys, I'm sorry, I have to look this one up.
And I feel guilty because I feel like I'm setting a bad example. I had to do that this last time too. That was the other major problem is I had an encounter table, and depending on how many, I do the dungeon dudes thing where they all roll a d6, and if any of them rolls a 1, that's going to trigger an encounter.
Okay.
The more ones that are rolled, there's a different set of encounters that get worse and worse and worse.
I guess I forgot about that. Yeah.
And I didn't realize till that day I had never finished fleshing that out, because I didn't think there's no way they're going to roll 4 1s out of 6, but they did. And so I had to punt. I mean, I had I called it a fog-touched coven of hags, and they were going to have extra powers because of the blue fog.
Right.
I don't remember what I intended. I had no memory of that. I just had to go with a plain old coven.
Yeah.
And I totally had to look up everything they could do and every spell, and I was just mortified that I had done that.
I know, and you kind of want to be like, hey guys, there's some food over there. Why don't you guys get up and go get some food? I mean,
Yeah.
that could be. I mean, really, honestly, that I think sometimes being upfront and honest with the players and saying something like, I wasn't really prepared for this. Let's take a quick break. I'm going to take some time to get ready for this next encounter and move forward that way. It still doesn't feel good, but boy, when that heat's on and I'm sitting there looking through the books and I'm like, I'm going to miss something. And you guys are all like looking at me and I'm like, what do I do next? So yeah, preparation certainly is a reflective, when you look back onto it, it's like, yeah, I probably should have been more prepared. But like we said, you can't be too hard on yourself because you can't prepare for everything.
Yeah. Should we take a break?
Yeah, let's take a quick break so that I can get my next encounter ready before we talk about the next item here. All right, well, we are talking behind the DM screen here on Teachers in the Dungeon. We will be right back. And we are back on Teachers in the Dungeon. I'm Tom Gross with Dan Ream, and we're doing a session on Behind the Screen. And it's
counseling session.
Counseling, basically, yes, counseling session, because we all know we struggle sometimes as DMs to make the session feel good.
Yeah.
And we walk away just feeling kind of crummy sometimes.
And
What else?
I was going to say, we're in the midst of talking about what do you do if you decide the session was not good? And we were kind of already talking about this, but I do think it is important to be not overly critical of yourself, but critical enough to say what we were just talking about. Yes, I needed to anticipate better. I needed to, for myself, I know incorporating backstory is something I struggle to do. I need to do that more, and because something like that could have lifted it a little more, made it a little more interesting. Make sure that you are disciplined enough to have the stats and things ready to go. And I think those things go a long way toward, one, establishing enough confidence that you can kind of free form if you need to. But then it makes it less likely because you are going to be more prepared.
Right. I mean, preparation is so important. When I think it's not just on the DM side, but on the players as well. I know that the sessions as a player that I come into, where I've looked at my character, I've looked at where he is, what spells still are available, kind of look back at the notes of where we've been. Those sessions are so much better as a player. I think it's the same as a DM, is knowing all of that stuff. And there have been times where I walk into something, I'm just like, holy cow, I know I'm not prepared. But you do it anyway. And then, here's another, I think this is another way to kind of help process it in game, is I think it's fair to say to the players, what do you guys remember of this?
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I do it trying to sneakily get by. Well, you don't remember, but being upfront and saying, guys, I don't have anything written about this, or I didn't go back and look. Can you tell me what?
I just like to hear what they remember.
Sometimes their perception.
Yeah.
This is another thing that sometimes I feel like I failed as a DM, and I don't know. Maybe this is a case of over planning. But I don't know if you've ever felt like it on your end. I can't think of an example, but you do a lot more games than the ones I'm just in. But is where like a battle just goes on forever.
Yeah.
And just doesn't ever seem to end. And the instance of that for me, and again, we'll talk about this in our recap of Waterdeep, one of these soon actually, is the battle with Dagger Dawn and Ashen Malor, when you first encountered them outside of Waterdeep on the way back from Saltmarsh. Oh man, I'm pretty sure we battled for 4.5 hours. Now, we were online, so weren't we? Yeah, we were online.
Yes.
That slowed things down a little bit, but I did not think that that battle would go on for so long.
Yeah.
It got spread across the map, and I mean, there's so many battle spots that were going on.
Well, and I think that's another thing where you perceived it very differently as the DM than we did.
Okay.
And that I remember that as a really exciting, by the skin of our teeth survival type of a battle. And I was still kind of in the phase where I had decided that my bard was the only one that was stepping up, and I decided, well, that's what he'll do. And so he waded right in. You set up the situation that should have made us pause, and instead I waded right in and got my hand slapped for it. In the sense that he got his bell rung pretty quick right out of the gate, and then I was like, oh shoot, now I have to play carefully, and I wasn't really even thinking that that's not really the bard's job. I'm supposed to be buffing all of my friends and
Right.
but
But it did get so spread out that
Yes.
that would have been difficult for you. I mean, when you're the person who supports everybody else, you like it when they stay nice and close.
Yeah.
And that did not happen in that one. And it kind of worked. That was sort of my plan, but I did not think it would take so long. And where I was really feeling bad was like 15, 20 minutes could pass between turns.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of discussion of strategy. You guys were asking a lot of good questions about, well, where do we see here? How far is this? What's in the way? That kind of stuff. That I was like, I was just feeling awful because I'm looking at the screen and seeing yawns, and I'm like, it is like, it's been 20 minutes since Laser Wolf made his last move. And so I was feeling bad there about that. So I'm glad to hear on your end that it didn't quite feel that way.
No.
But yeah, I was looking for, and I was trying so hard to figure out how can I pick up the pace of this battle, and just nothing that I tried seemed to work. And like I did some things with those. So there were some gazers involved on the perimeter.
Yes.
That I was actually trying to use them. I initially wanted them to kind of put you guys in a hard plot spot. Then I was like, they're all spread out. So I tried to use them to try to get you guys back into like a center, and that didn't work.
Yeah.
And so it just went. Now it did without giving anything away. It did end in sort of a dramatic fashion.
Yeah.
That helped me feel a little better at the end, but at the same time not. But I don't know. I left that one thinking, okay, in what ways could I have changed that? Because the goal number one was I did want it to be a challenge to the point where I didn't want to kill you guys, but at the same time, I didn't want you to kill them either, because my intent was they were going to be recurring characters.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted them to get away. So I tried to make it challenging on that level, but I think that just sort of made it to where, like you said earlier, it was a slog, and just several different battle fronts formed, and I couldn't keep the battle moving. And I still don't know that I could think of a different way to do that.
No, and because you couldn't control what we did, and you had, a couple characters charging in and a couple characters almost running the other way.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't much to be done except that.
So, again, I go back to how do you process something like that when something in game doesn't go so well? I don't know if you've got something. What I was thinking was I just go back to that reflection. Just go back and think about, play the battle out again in your mind, and what could you have done differently?
Well, and my final thing, much easier said than done, the final point I wanted to make ties into that a little bit, which is when all is said and done, give yourself a little bit of grace
Oh,
on this
yeah.
as a DM. Most of us are still learning. Hopefully all of us are.
Yeah.
And if the players are doing what they're supposed to be doing, they probably are going to be throwing you some curveballs. You're not going to hit everyone.
Right.
Nobody's going to be perfect all the time. And the other thing that I have to remember too is, you mentioned it earlier, this is cooperative storytelling. It does take everybody. So, maybe the players themselves did not step up the way they should have.
Oh, yeah.
And that's certainly, like I said, I think with my dads and kids group, everybody was tired, which is very understandable, but consequently I wasn't getting much back from them when I
Right.
tried to role play some of these things.
Yeah, I've had that happen, not so much with our group. Usually our group is pretty well, we meet once a month. So it's like, you got to be on your A game.
Yeah.
And even if you're not, you have to act like you are.
Yeah.
But when I played in college, there were a lot of times when several different factors came into play of where I was like looking at them like, and I remember a couple of times saying, do you guys really want to play tonight? because they're trying to watch a game on the TV while we're playing,
Oh.
or some of them, the alcohol might have been flowing a little bit more, and I'm like, guys, you're kind of acting like idiots now. Do you want to just stop? No. We'll shape up and that kind of thing. And they did, because most of the time when you get together to play Dungeons and Dragons, whether it's every week, once a month, or every 6 months, you want to play.
Yeah.
You want to play. I want to throw a curveball to you right now, because something that came up makes me think about this, because when we talk about ways of coping in this, sometimes we do, as DMs, have to take a risk. And so I'm kind of wondering if you can think, I'll go first so you can have some time to think about it, but is there a time when you, as the DM, knew you were going into a game trying something that you had no idea if it was going to work, but you thought so strongly about it that you pushed forward with it? So I'll let you think while I tell you mine, because mine happened in your pergola area. It was a nice day outside, and it was in Waterdeep. So the background, if you haven't listened to our recaps, are Waterdeep is a brand new adventure style for me as a DM. I've never really played a campaign that is solely set in the city.
Right.
Now, I'm always excited to try to push you guys out of the city for like a foray here or there, but really the bulk of it, everything takes place in the city. I was really struggling in preparing because you guys were sort of establishing yourselves as members of the city. Part adventurer, part contributors to a society. And I couldn't think of really a good way that through adventure and battle and fighting and traditional Dungeons and Dragons style to have that happen. My risk taking was I planned an entire session that involved zero combat, but even more so than just that, I really planned a session that required very few dice rolls. Mm-hmm. It was 100% just us talking and role-playing instances. Mm-hmm. And I was super nervous about that because I wasn't exactly sure how to prepare for that. So I had prepared what were the most likely places you guys were going to want to go to, mm-hmm. and try to establish what kind of person is this, and I tried to establish all the NPCs. Worked pretty well. You guys threw some curveballs where I had to make up some NPCs along the way, but that worked really well. But what I was really most nervous about was you guys splitting up, which of course you did.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't you? I mean, it made perfect sense. You guys are like, oh, I really kind of want to do this project over here, or I want to go here, and someone else wants to go over here. And so my big fear was if you and I, Nikistos wants to go someplace, usually you guys went in twos. Mm-hmm. And so a couple of you go one place. We spend 30, 40 minutes role-playing over here, and I got 3 other people sitting out there with us, just sort of like twiddling their thumbs. And I was taking note of like what were people doing, while it was going on. And I noticed like Paul very often would go to and sort of look through the book. And I think he was kind of looking at his character and things like that, because mm-hmm. Paul was pretty new to our group when I did that. Mm-hmm. And so I saw he was keeping himself busy there. And Marcus and Chris, I think, just sort of it seemed to me, now I hope, because this wasn't necessarily a risk-taking moment where I walked away feeling awful about it. Mm-hmm. I walked away a little uneasy, like that wasn't sure how it went.
Right.
But in the long run, it very much pushed the story forward.
Oh, yeah.
And set up actually several different directions for adventure for you guys. But I don't know. I'm kind of curious. We've talked about it a little bit, but I'm curious what sort of feedback you had about those sessions. Because we've done several of them.
Yeah, I think for myself as a player, I understood, and to be honest, role playing continually is a little tiring. So I actually didn't mind the break.
Oh,
go up.
Okay.
I could get up, get some food. Mm-hmm. Run to the bathroom if I needed to. Mm-hmm. That sort of thing. So that was perfectly okay. And the location was kind of good too, because we had a fire going and that sort of thing. So you can just chill out and just watch the fire and kind of listen to people interact. So it was fine. I think we all understood. No, this is the way it's going to be. You can't involve us all.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad to hear that. And yes, I 1000% agree that that's one of the reasons why I love when we play Waterdeep in the summer,
Yeah.
because of all the role playing and kind of splitting up and things like that, being outside, like you said, the fire. It's sort of a nice distraction for those. And for me, it makes me feel less like we're not confined in like one area and
Yeah.
trying to work around a table necessarily. We're just sort of sitting around. It's almost like we're sitting around just talking.
Yeah.
But what's cool is we're talking in like the context of the story,
Tell
which
the
is
story
really
together.
cool. So
Yeah.
so that was a huge risk take for me, and I feel like it came away pretty good. Stressful going in, but walking away, I felt really good about it. Can you think of any instances where you felt like you took a big risk?
No.
Okay.
Because I'm not a risk taker, unfortunately. Little risks, definitely. But this would probably fit better in another episode. But slowly realizing, I jumped into DMing before I knew what I was doing, to be perfectly honest. And that was, I know Chris saw that immediately and was just gracious enough not to call me out on how much I was railroading you guys.
Oh,
So it wasn't until you guys got to Gench, and that was my risk, that I thought, okay, I'm going to create this city, and they are going to have options.
yeah.
And so that was a risk. And I feel like it paid off in that I got confidence, and there were some very memorable moments that happened because of the way the city was laid out
Right.
and all of that. So that made it fun. And it worked out, I think, probably how it always does, in that you saw and interacted with about 15% of what I had planned. You had I had NPCs in every single noble family.
Yeah.
Because you could have gone, you decided not to do this, but you could have gone and actually tried to investigate the murders and the crimes. And you could have gone to each house and questioned them. And I had the way the houses looked. I had the symbol for each of the families. I had what the the tension or camaraderie between the various members of the family, and
Okay.
I had all that set up.
Oh, wow.
Hindsight, I'm kind of glad that I didn't have to run all that, but you could have done that.
I felt like now that you're telling that, I feel like we kind of started that and then moved on to something else. Like we bailed on that pretty quickly. I seem to remember talking to one of the houses and questioning them on the murders, and then somehow either they diverted us to something else to.
I think I might have done that too. I always have a little too much stuffed into what's
Yeah.
going to happen, and I think I had Artaxis come across your path.
Oh, right.
And you could have told him no. You could have continued on with what you were going to do, but he convinced you to team up.
Yeah.
And honestly, I didn't really think that would happen. I wasn't entirely sure you were going to go with him.
Well, the nice thing about having all that stuff is if you ever did decide to, put it all together into a package that people could, grab a PDF off the internet for a small sum. That it's all there. It's all there. And people could play this. And you have played this with more than one group. So
And they've all done different things. It's been kind of
Yeah.
fun to see how it unfolds.
I do. We should do a show where we talk about that sometime. Your experience of playing the same adventure with multiple
Yeah.
groups and how that played out. But I guess in the long run, when I think about the times where it just didn't feel right to me, and I walked away kind of like, meh, I kind of stunk. Ultimately, when you put all the things that we talked about, give yourself some grace, be reflective, and how could you have done that differently? And I forget your first one.
Check with your players and make sure it really was
Yeah, right.
a
Okay.
failure, because it might not have been.
Is in the long run, you played a game.
Yeah.
And whether people thought it was slow, or whether people thought, man, that was a lot of combat, or there was hardly anything for me to do in this one, is you still played a game. You still got together with friends, and you get together again. And next time, maybe it'll be great. Maybe it'll just be a fun adventure, and maybe you'll feel the same way. But I always think this in the back of my head, is if they don't think it's very much fun, well, one of them could do it.
Right.
One of them could step up to the plate
Right.
and be DM. And, and maybe, wait, maybe that's why you did. No, I just think it's regardless. You know, the honest truth is we feel that way sometimes.
Yeah.
But in the long run, everyone understands, and everyone hopefully is giving you grace.
Yes. And I think that is one of the things we're very fortunate in, is that we do play these games with friends who are mature and kind, and they get it, and they're not going to be, if they are bored, they're not going to show that, and they're not going to take it out on us.
Right. Exactly. So, well, fun. This was a good conversation. It was very, as you said earlier, very therapeutic.
Yes.
To get those ideas. Yes.
Get this all out.
And so, well, you out there listening, if you're a DM and you've walked away from a game just feeling awful, and you had a coping mechanism that's different than something we talked about, it's something that you did to help get yourself through that, to get to the next game and really push forward, we'd love to hear about that.
Yeah.
You can, as we mentioned in the opening, you jump on social media, give us some notes or tips that you'd like us to share, or send us an email, give us a description like we have today of how that went. We'd love to share your stories on the show. And so again, teachersinthedungeon@gmail.com. Dan, any final thoughts that you want to put out there?
No, I think I've talked long enough.
Okay. Well, me too. And so after we sign off, though, I'm going to walk away going, man, that probably could have gone better. Wonder how that could have went a little bit better. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining us today on Teachers in the Dungeon. And until next time, keep rolling those 20s. So long, folks.
That wraps up today's session. So thank you for listening to Teachers in the Dungeon. We appreciate you and your feedback. Until the next time we see you in the dungeon, we hope you roll high on those saving throws. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear what happens in the adventure, subscribe to the podcast. Have questions, thoughts, or ideas? Check the show notes for our website and our contact information. This podcast is not affiliated or endorsed by Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, or any other third-party Dungeons & Dragons entity. Teachers in the Dungeon is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All names and sounds and any other related items are properties of their respective trademarks and/or copyright holders in the U.S. or abroad. The official Dungeons & Dragons website can be found at www.dnd.wizards.com.